Hi folks, and welcome to How to Help videos. In this video I'm going to show you the very basics of what you need to do to set up your own website and get your own email address. I'm not going to run through all the specifics of how to do it. I'm just going to give you a good overview. That way you'll understand what you need to do, and then it's much easier to go and source the information on the next step if that's what you'd like to do. This isn't one of those videos where I show you how to set up a website in 10 seconds flat, because the reality of it is you will want to customize your own website. If you are looking to set up your own website in 10 seconds flat, you can simply go over to the wordpress.com website and follow the prompts there. You've got create a website, and this will allow you to create a website, but it won't be with your own domain name. It'll be using the WordPress domain. So it's not essentially your own website. It's not something that you would use for a website that's professional, for example. Now, if we get started, you would have just heard me say the word domain name. And what is a domain name? Well, a domain name is basically the identity that you're going to give your website or your email addresses. So you need a domain name whether you're going to use your own emails or your own website. So that's the first step, and your domain name can be whatever you would like it to be. Now, there are companies out there that integrate domain names and websites all together in the one package, but you generally do pay a little bit more for those because they get you in on a cheap deal, and then it gets a little bit more expensive the following year. To check domain names, you can just go to Google, type in domain names, and you can see that there are a lot of companies out there selling domain names really cheap. How do you know which domain name you can get? Well, what you can do is go to any of these domain registers and type in whatever you would like. So if you're looking to check whether or not a particular domain is available, you can just type in Apple, for example, and see if it's available in .com.au. Now, domain names come in many different suffixes. It's known as a suffix at the end. So you've got .net, .com, .net, whatever. So something might not be available in .com, but it may be available in .net. You just need to check it. So if we just do that and do check available, you'll see here that it's told us that apple.com is in use by another company. It cannot be registered. So that's how you go and check if your domain name is going to be available. Once you've got your domain name, you're going to need some hosting. So what is hosting? Well, basically, if you're going to use a website or an email address on the internet, you're going to need a computer on the internet that holds that information for you. And that's what a host is. It's a server that basically you can rent that will hold your website or will store your emails for you. Now, depending on what you're using this server for, it'll be called either your email or your mail server, or you can also refer to it as your web server, depending on the role it's performing. It can also be both, so it could be your mail and web server. And this is the server address you're going to need if you're going to connect things like your emails from your smartphone or computer. And generally, a lot of the companies that sell domain names also provide hosting, so they integrate all of this into one package. But as I said, it can cost you a little bit extra. You can get your domain name from one company and then do your hosting with somebody else. That's entirely possible. So if you just jump across to Google and type in web hosting, you'll see there's a lot of options here, and you can just go ahead, scroll through and pick any of these. You do need to make sure that you do go with a reasonably good provider, because sometimes web hosts have a tendency to go down, so they get problems, and that means that your web page will be unavailable whilst they're having problems. And you also need to make sure you've got good support. Now, if you're looking to only set up your own email address and not have a website, you can take a different path here, and it gets a lot easier. You can just simply go to Google Apps, for example, and you can import your domain into Google Apps, and it will only cost you about $5 a month, and they will host your emails for you, which is basically Google. So you'll have your emails on a Google web server, and then you can go ahead and connect your phones and your computers to Google, and it's your own private area with your personal domain, and it will synchronize with all of your devices, and that's where your emails will be hosted. It's nice and safe, nice and reliable, and it works really well. In fact, I use it myself as well. And that's it. That's how you can go ahead and get your own email address. The act of setting Google Apps up can be a little bit more complicated for the beginner, but they do have a pretty good tutorial that shows you exactly what you need to do. Now that we've got our hosting sorted out, what we need is a website. So the website is the software that sits on the hosting server, and that's what people connect to and can see. So you've got your domain name, which you register with the domain registrar, then you'll have your hosting, and then you've got your website that sits on that hosting server. So that's essentially how your website cobbles together. Now don't forget, you can get companies that will do all of this for you in one hit, so it makes it nice and easy. To set up your website, you're going to use something like WordPress. Everybody is going to recommend that you use WordPress because WordPress is really good for people who are just beginning to set up their own website. Now WordPress is basically a framework that creates a website for you, and they do it in such a way that you don't need to be technical. You can do it on a computer without too much technical knowledge. But that's going to give you a pretty basic website. It's not going to give you anything fancy. Now you can have an attempt at trying to create your own website, but if you're a real beginner, then you're quickly going to run into a limitation unless you're prepared to settle for quite a basic website. Or you can go to a professional and they can use WordPress to create quite a nice site for you. And the other benefit of WordPress is that you can go in later via an admin panel and you can actually make changes to the website really simply. You don't need to engage your web developer every time you need to change words or add pictures to your website. Now this is especially true if you want to run and have a blog. WordPress is pretty much the go-to software if anyone wants to run a blog because it's so easy to go ahead and add posts and information to that blog. What we're looking at here is the control panel for my hosting provider. So I've got a host server that hosts my website, and this is all the stuff that you can go and do to set up your configuration. So if you have a hosting server for your website, they will generally always provide you with email addresses as well. So you can see here I've got email accounts, and I can get up to 5 email accounts as part of my web hosting, so I don't need to purchase emails separately. With this computer, what will happen is I can actually have WordPress installed on that computer, and there are tutorials out there that show you how to go ahead and install WordPress on your web server. Because you're paying for web hosting, you would call the company and ask them to set it up for you, or at least show you how to do it. And that will give you WordPress as a basic website, which you can then go ahead and modify and create a web page. But what I wanted to do in this video is just give you an overview of how it all works and bolts together. So we start with our domain name that we need to register. You need a hosting solution, and then you have your website on your web server, which is your hosting server. You can also integrate your emails on your hosting server, or you can just go and get a domain name and have email hosting with somebody like Google Apps, for example. So hopefully you found this information quite useful.